This is Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, or at least that's what the Germans believed when his body washed ashore on the Spanish coast in April 1943, clutching a briefcase containing top-secret Allied invasion plans. The documents revealed that the Allies would invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. German High Command studied the papers, verified the authenticity, and immediately began moving troops and equipment away from Sicily to defend the real targets. Hitler himself approved the redeployment. There was just one problem. Major William Martin never existed. The body was a homeless man who had died from pneumonia in London. The documents were forgeries, and the entire operation was the most audacious deception in military history. One that would cost thousands of German lives and hand the Allies their first foothold in Europe. This is Operation Mincemeat and the invasion of Italy that followed. By early 1943, the war was not going well for the Allies. The Soviet Union was bleeding on the Eastern Front. Britain had survived the Blitz, but couldn't launch a cross-channel invasion yet. America was still building up forces. Stalin demanded a second front to relieve pressure on his armies, and Churchill needed a victory to maintain British morale. The target was obvious: Sicily. The island sat at the crossroads of the Mediterranean, controlled shipping lanes, and provided air bases that could support an invasion of mainland Italy. From Sicily, the Allies could knock Italy out of the war and force Germany to defend yet another front. But Sicily was also the most obvious target. Any competent German strategist would predict it. The island was heavily fortified, with 2 German divisions and 10 Italian divisions, approximately 300,000 troops. The coastline bristled with artillery and machine gun positions. Luftwaffe fighters operated from multiple airfields. An amphibious assault against a prepared defense would be a bloodbath. The Allies needed the Germans to look elsewhere, to spread their forces thin, defending the wrong locations. They needed deception on a scale never before attempted. British intelligence had been running small deception operations throughout the war, with mixed success. But this needed to be perfect. The plan had to be so convincing that German intelligence would believe it completely, and Hitler himself would commit reserves based on false information. The concept came from Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley and Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montagu of British Naval Intelligence. Their idea was simple but morbid. Plant fake documents on a corpse, let it wash ashore in Spain, where German spies operated freely, and let the Germans discover the evidence themselves. The plan required finding a body that looked like it had drowned recently. The corpse needed proper identification, a complete backstory, and documents important enough that the Germans would take them seriously. And the entire deception needed to be executed flawlessly, because if the Germans suspected a trick, the real invasion would face disaster. Finding the right body was the first challenge. It needed to be a man who had died recently, whose body would pass medical examination as a drowning victim. Cholmondeley and Montagu secretly contacted coroners and morgue workers, looking for someone whose death and body condition matched their requirements. They found Glyndwr Michael, a homeless man who had died from eating rat poison containing phosphorus. The poison had caused pneumonia-like symptoms, and his body showed fluid in the lungs that could be mistaken for drowning. He had no family who might ask questions. He was perfect for their purposes, though they never told his family what his body would be used for. Next came creating an identity. Major William Martin was born on paper, complete with identity card, military papers, personal letters, ticket stubs, and even a photograph of his supposed fiancée. The letters were carefully crafted to seem authentic, written by intelligence officers pretending to be Martin's family and girlfriend. The attention to detail was extraordinary. Martin's pockets contained theater stubs dated before his supposed death. His wallet held receipts. A letter from his bank warned about his overdraft. Another letter from his father made references to family matters. The goal was to create such a complete person that German intelligence would never question his existence. The critical documents were carefully crafted forgeries. A letter from Lieutenant General Archibald Nye to General Harold Alexander discussed the upcoming invasions of Greece and Sardinia, mentioning Sicily only as a deception target to fool the Germans. Another letter discussed the assignment of commands and logistics for these operations. The forgeries needed to look authentic, but not too perfect. They were written on proper letterhead with correct signatures and stamps, but included small errors and informal language that made them seem like genuine correspondence rather than official documents. On April 1943, the submarine HMS Seraph departed from Scotland, carrying a sealed canister containing the body of Major Martin. The crew wasn't told what was inside. Only the submarine's captain and a few intelligence officers knew the true nature of the cargo. The submarine traveled submerged for most of the journey to avoid German patrols. On April 30th, it surfaced off the coast of Huelva, Spain, near the mouth of the Odiel River. The location was carefully chosen because German intelligence had strong networks in the area and local currents would carry the body ashore. At 4:30 a.m., the canister was opened. The body, dressed in a Royal Marines uniform with a life jacket, was placed in the water along with the briefcase chained to its wrist. The crew said a brief prayer and departed immediately, leaving the corpse to drift toward the Spanish coast. The body was discovered later that morning by a Spanish fisherman named José Antonio Rey María. Spanish authorities recovered it and notified the British vice consul, as was standard procedure for bodies of Allied servicemen. But they also notified the Spanish Navy, which had close ties to German intelligence. The Spanish conducted a post-mortem examination. The local doctor determined the cause of death was drowning, probably after an aircraft crash at sea. He noted that the body had been in the water for 3 to 5 days, which matched the supposed timeline. The deception was working. German intelligence in Madrid sent the documents to Berlin marked urgent and most secret. British intelligence monitored German communications through decoded Enigma messages. They watched anxiously as the Germans studied the documents, verified signatures, and discussed their implications. For several days, the outcome hung in the balance. If the Germans suspected a deception, the invasion of Sicily would face fully prepared defenses. On May 14th, German naval intelligence declared the documents genuine. The assessment noted that the body had been in the water for the claimed time period. The documents appeared authentic, and the contents matched other intelligence suggesting Allied interest in Greece. Adolf Hitler personally reviewed the assessment and agreed with the conclusion. The effect was immediate and dramatic. German forces in Greece were reinforced. A panzer division was moved from France to Greece. Coastal defenses in Sardinia were strengthened, and critically, German forces were reduced in Sicily, with some units redeployed to defend the real invasion targets. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was sent to Greece to oversee defenses. Hitler was convinced that Greece was the primary target, with Sardinia as a secondary objective. Sicily was treated as a deception, a place the Allies wanted the Germans to defend while they struck elsewhere. British intelligence knew the deception had succeeded when decoded German messages referenced the documents and discussed defensive preparations for Greece. Churchill was informed, and planning for the invasion of Sicily continued with the knowledge that German defenses would be weakened. The body of Major Martin was buried in Huelva with full military honors. Spanish authorities allowed British officials to attend the funeral. The grave marker read, "William Martin, born 29th March 1907, died 24th April 1943, beloved son of John Glyndor Martin and the late Antonia Martin of Cardiff, Wales. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori." The real Glyndor Michael's family was never told that his body had been used for military deception. That secret remained classified for decades after the war. On the night of July 9, 1943, the largest amphibious operation to that point in history began. Operation Husky involved 160,000 troops in the initial landings, with 3,000 ships and 4,000 aircraft supporting the invasion. The American 7th Army under General George Patton would land on the western and central beaches. The British 8th Army under General Bernard Montgomery would land on the eastern beaches. The invasion began with airborne landings. American and British paratroopers jumped behind enemy lines to secure key bridges and crossroads. High winds scattered the formations, with many paratroopers landing miles from their intended drop zones. Despite the chaos, they disrupted Italian communications and prevented reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Glider forces followed, carrying heavy equipment and additional troops. Many gliders were released too early due to navigational errors and poor coordination with naval forces. Several crashed into the sea, drowning the soldiers inside. Others landed on rocky terrain that shattered the fragile gliders on impact. The airborne operations were costly, but they achieved their objective of causing confusion behind enemy lines. The amphibious landings began at 2:45 a.m. Landing craft loaded with troops approached beaches designated with code names Scent, Dime, Joss for the Americans, Acid, Bark, Beer for the British. Rough seas complicated the landings, with many soldiers seasick before they even reached shore. Italian coastal defense units fired on the approaching landing craft. Artillery shells exploded in the water. Machine gun fire raked to the beaches. But the Italian defenders were demoralized and poorly led. Many surrendered after token resistance. The Germans had positioned their mobile reserves inland, expecting to counterattack once the Allies revealed their main effort. American forces landing at Gela faced the strongest resistance. German Hermann Göring Panzer Division counterattacked on July 11th, pushing tanks down to the waterline. Naval gunfire from destroyers offshore broke up the German assault, destroying dozens of tanks. The beachhead held, barely. British forces advancing toward Syracuse faced less resistance. Italian units abandoned their positions or surrendered en masse. By the evening of July 10th, the Allies had 80,000 troops ashore across multiple beachheads. Casualties were far lower than expected, approximately 2,000 killed and wounded compared to predictions of 10,000 or more. The success of the landings proved that Operation Mincemeat had worked. German reserves that should have been in Sicily were scattered across Greece and Sardinia. The two German divisions on Sicily, the 15th Panzer Grenadier and Hermann Göring Panzer, were spread thin, trying to cover the entire coastline. They didn't know where the main Allied effort would fall because they didn't know where the main Allied effort would fall. Over the following weeks, Allied forces pushed inland. Patton's 7th Army raced across western Sicily, capturing Palermo on July 23rd. Montgomery's 8th Army advanced up the eastern coast toward Messina, facing stronger German resistance in the mountainous terrain. German forces conducted a fighting withdrawal, delaying the Allied advance while preparing to evacuate across the Strait of Messina to mainland Italy. The campaign for Sicily lasted 38 days. The Allies captured the entire island, although approximately 100,000 German and Italian troops successfully evacuated to the mainland. The Allies suffered 24,000 casualties. Axis losses exceeded 160,000, including 32,000 Germans killed or captured and 140,000 Italians killed, wounded, or captured. More importantly, the conquest of Sicily achieved strategic objectives beyond the island itself. It secured Mediterranean shipping lanes. It provided air bases from which to bomb southern Italy and the Balkans. And it triggered the collapse of Mussolini's fascist government. On July 25, 1943, Mussolini was removed from power by the Italian Grand Council and arrested. The new Italian government under Marshal Pietro Badoglio secretly began negotiating surrender with the Allies, while publicly claiming continued loyalty to Germany. Hitler, suspecting Italian treachery, began moving additional German divisions into Italy to prepare for Italy's inevitable defection.
On September 3, 1943, British forces crossed the Strait of Messina and landed on the toe of the Italian boot. Resistance was minimal. German forces had withdrawn north, abandoning Calabria to the advancing British. The same day, Italy signed a secret armistice with the Allies, though it wouldn't be announced until September 8th. The main invasion came on September 9th at Salerno, south of Naples. The American Fifth Army under General Mark Clark landed on beaches designated with colors: red, green, yellow, blue. German forces under Field Marshal Albert Kesselring were waiting. Unlike Sicily, where German defenses were spread thin by the mincemeat deception, the Germans were concentrated and prepared at Salerno. They held the high ground overlooking the beaches. Artillery was pre-registered on the landing zones. Panzer divisions were positioned to counterattack immediately. The landings at Salerno became a desperate struggle. German artillery decimated the first waves. Panzer units pushed down to the waterline at several points, nearly splitting the beachhead. For 5 days, the outcome hung in balance. Allied forces held on only through massive naval fire support and continuous air attacks against German positions. German counterattacks on September 13th nearly drove the Allies back into the sea. General Clark prepared plans for emergency evacuation. Only the commitment of the entire naval fire support and the arrival of reinforcements prevented disaster. By September 18th, the Germans withdrew, recognizing they couldn't eliminate the beachhead. The campaign in Italy became a grinding war of attrition. German forces established defensive lines across the mountainous spine of Italy. The terrain favored defense, with every river, ridge, and valley requiring separate assaults. Allied forces advanced slowly, paying heavily for each mile gained. The Winter Line, anchored on Monte Cassino, halted the Allied advance for months. German paratroopers defending the monastery and surrounding heights inflicted terrible casualties on attacking forces. The monastery itself was destroyed by bombing in February 1944, but German forces continued to hold the ruins. Not until May 1944 did Allied forces finally break through, at a cost of 55,000 casualties. Rome fell on June 4, 1944, the first Axis capital to be liberated. But the campaign continued. German forces established new defensive lines in northern Italy. Fighting continued through 1944 and into 1945. The mountainous terrain, poor weather, and determined German resistance turned Italy into a brutal campaign of attrition that tied down Allied forces that might have been used elsewhere. The Italian campaign has been criticized as a strategic error that diverted resources from more important objectives, like the invasion of France.
But it achieved significant goals. It knocked Italy out of the war. It tied down 25 German divisions that couldn't be used against the Soviets or to defend France. And it provided air bases for bombing campaigns against Germany and the Balkans. The campaign also validated the importance of deception. Operation Mincemeat had made the Sicily invasion possible by drawing German forces away. Without that deception, the landings on Sicily might have faced the same desperate struggle as Salerno, with far higher casualties and possibly failure. The success of Mincemeat inspired additional deception operations. Operation Fortitude, the deception plan for D-Day, used similar techniques on a much larger scale. Phantom armies, fake radio traffic, and double agents convinced Hitler that the Normandy invasion was a feint and the real attack would come at Calais. German reserves were held back for weeks after D-Day, waiting for an invasion that never came. The invasion of Italy, enabled by a corpse and fake documents, proved that in modern warfare, deception could be as important as firepower. The Allies had learned to wage war not just with tanks and aircraft, but with carefully crafted lies that shaped enemy decisions and saved thousands of Allied lives. By the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, Operation Mincemeat was still classified. The full story didn't emerge until after the war, when Ewan Montague published a book about the operation. The deception had been so successful that some German intelligence officers apparently never realized they'd been fooled. The grave of Major William Martin remains in Huelva, tended by the British government. Tourists who visit have no idea that the man buried there was actually Glyndwr Michael, a homeless man whose body was used to deceive Hitler and change the course of the war. His contribution to Allied victory was never acknowledged in his lifetime, but it may have saved tens of thousands of lives by enabling the invasion that knocked Italy out of the war and brought the Allies one step closer to defeating Nazi Germany. That is how a dead body and a briefcase full of lies outsmarted the Nazis and gave the Allies their first foothold in Europe.